An Israeli airstrike today in Gaza's Jabalia refugee camp demolished a residential building. Emergency crews said families were inside. As the vast civilian toll of this war ratcheted up again, Israel's Prime Minister and Defense Minister were put on notice that they could face prosecution at the International Criminal Court.
The crimes include starvation of civilians as a method of warfare, willfully causing great suffering, serious injury to body or health or cruel treatment, willful killing or murder, and intentionally directing attacks against a civilian population, as well as crimes against humanity of extermination and or murder.
Mr. Khan is formally requesting arrest warrants against Israel's Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant, and its Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. The case is much about repeated denial of humanitarian necessities as the direct killing of Palestinian civilians. This evening, Israel's Prime Minister called it a distortion of reality, a form of new anti-Semitism.
Prosecutor in The Hague, with what audacity do you dare compare the monsters of Hamas to the soldiers of the IDF, the most moral army in the world? With what audacity do you compare Hamas, that murdered, burned, butchered, raped and kidnapped our brothers and sisters, and the IDF soldiers who are fighting a just war that is unparalleled in morality?
Israeli civilians in their hundreds were killed and kidnapped in the Hamas attacks of October the 7th. As part of his investigation, Karim Khan visited the sites of the massacres late last year. Today, he's seeking arrest warrants for Hamas's Gaza chief, Yahya Sinwar, the head of its military wing, Mohammed Deif, and its Qatar-based political leader, Ismail Haniyeh.
There are reasonable grounds to believe that these three Hamas leaders are criminally responsible for the killing of Israeli civilians in attacks perpetrated by Hamas and other armed groups on the 7th of October 2023, the taking of hostages, and the other crimes alleged in our applications.
Those other crimes, he said, included horrendous sexual violence, including rape. Hamas denounced the decision, saying the prosecutor was equating the victim with the executioner. When Vladimir Putin was hit with an ICC arrest warrant over Ukraine, it immediately meant travel to any signatory to the Rome Statute. China, not one of them, risked possible arrest. For now, no such risk for Benjamin Netanyahu, at least not until a panel of judges rules on the prosecutor's request. Britain, an ICC member, has called the move unhelpful. President Biden has labelled it outrageous. Legal experts say a decision on the warrants could come within weeks.
Well, I'm joined now by the barrister Toby Cadman, who specialises in international criminal and human rights law. There's an argument over whether the ICC has jurisdiction here. The Americans, Israelis and Britain are saying they don't. How does it have jurisdiction when Israel isn't a signatory and Palestine isn't a state?
Well, first of all, one of the things that we've heard today is there was the report by the panel of experts, and one of the things that they've looked at very, very carefully is the question of jurisdiction. Very clearly declares that Palestine is a state for the purpose of the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, and has stated that the attacks in Gaza, which Karim Khan has referred to as a complete siege of Gaza, is part of an international armed conflict, and the attacks by Hamas in Israel are part of a non-international armed conflict. But if we look at the...
So they can say that even though Palestine isn't an internationally recognised state, for the purposes of the court, it is. That's going to sound odd to people.
Well, no. I mean, effectively what they're saying is they're confirming that Palestine is a state. Now, if we go back to 2015, when Palestine ratified the Rome Statute, and in 2018, when it referred itself to the International Criminal Court, the prosecutor at that time took the rather extraordinary step of asking a panel of the pretrial judges to determine whether the Office of the Prosecutor had jurisdiction over what happened in Palestine. And the panel of judges clearly said that it does.
So does this mean that if an arrest warrant is granted, any country that is a signatory to the ICC would have an obligation to arrest Netanyahu if he sets foot in their country?
Absolutely, yes. It's very clearly what it means.
So this could massively restrict his ability to act as an international leader?
It could and it should, yes.
And I mean, why wouldn't that arrest warrant be granted? You know, what would be the argument against it, given the prosecutor has applied, saying there's a case to answer?
I mean, it's certainly not going to be a question of jurisdiction, because that question has clearly been answered. And just to be clear, is that the jurisdictional question, Palestine as a state, so any crimes that are committed on the territory of Palestine falls within its jurisdiction, and any crimes committed by a Palestinian national in Israel would also fall within its jurisdiction. So it's not going to be a question of jurisdiction, it's an evidential question. And certainly what we've seen so far, what has been said by Karim Khan today, and what we've been seeing for the last few months, very clearly, there is a very strong evidential basis for those arrest warrants to be granted.
I mean, we have seen in the past arrest warrants not being enforced by South Africa, you know, most recently. So does this end up being any more than grandstanding if nobody arrests them?
Well, I wouldn't say that it's grandstanding. Of course, what Karim Khan has done, and again, he's taken the rather extraordinary step of making this public now, which is something he didn't do with the Putin arrest warrant. But of course, he's hopeful, as we've heard from him today, that this will have more of a preventative effect to prevent further crimes from being committed. We've also heard from Netanyahu, and we've been listening to Israeli leaders with this rhetoric over the past few weeks that nothing will stop them. But of course, what it does mean is that the warrants issued by the International Criminal Court, we have seen what happened in South Africa with al-Bashir. I think it's unlikely that we would see the same. What almost certainly will happen will be European states, predominantly European states who are members of the ICC, will try to deter Netanyahu and his defence minister from actually travelling to those countries, because they would be obligated to arrest.
Right, Toby Cabot, thank you very much indeed.